Today we're going to be doing a deep dive onto Rogue. So the way we're going to separate this up is into 3 chunks. What we're going to do first of all is look at the mistakes. What were Rogue's mistakes against G2? What are their mistakes across the entirety of the split? What are places that they might fumble or places you can target? The next thing we're going to look at is their stylistic approach. These are the questions that I have for Rogue. You know, these are the questions that I'll be thinking that I should be aware of during a series and things that I'll be asking myself, make myself aware just in case these scenarios happen. The third thing we're going to look at is draft expectations. What do you expect Rogue to do? What's the safest? What's the craziest they can go? What is the boundaries that Rogue can push Fnatic in the draft? So let's start off with mistakes. We're going to start off with Game 3, G2 versus Rogue. And we're going to look at the way that they lost this game, because I think that they were in a really winning state in this game especially. So the first thing I want to talk about is dragon fights and dragon fight execution. Now, I think that Rogue had really good options for winning dragon fights, but they fumbled their dragon fights a little bit too much. Now, the game slipped out of their hands eventually after they got caught a few times, but the first thing I would be telling Malrang is how to team fight a bit better. So here's the example that I wanted to look at. It's the Hextech Soul second dragon spawn. Now, it's very rare in scrim reviews that you go over micros in team fights, but it's very normal to go over the holistic approach of the team fight. Now, what I think Rogue is doing wrong in this fight is they're approaching it way too much like a head-on 5v5. When I was watching the VOD of this, I thought to myself that Rogue had such good avenues for engage, but the way they're approaching this fight is already wrong. Comp is over here, all right? Now, I don't know why he ran down there. I don't know why he's trying to do that. Maybe he's thinking he wants to poke someone. But the very ideal position is here to poke through this wall or here to poke through this wall. That's what you'll see a lot in regions like China. So he goes back to where he originally should be. Now, Malrang has to use his W here because he starts the Drake and G2 come up. Malrang's in the wrong position. Malrang and Com should be swapped here. If you are an LPL enjoyer or an LCK enjoyer, you'll often see that Dragon is never like this. It's never a head-on 5v5. It's never a stare-down. Unless both comps have straight up front to back, you know, Orin Sion, Trundle Sejuani, 2 champs that just want to run each other. But champs like Wukong can really flip the way fights are played. Sylas is another exception, Rakan, and you'll see Targamas doing this just in a second. The Dragon is never a head-on fight. It's always an angled fight. You know, you'll see champs like Lissandra, LeBlanc, you know, Sylas, Rakan, Wukong coming around angles. You'll see them fishing for pinks up here, fishing for pinks down here, fishing for wards. And if they can poke their way through enough, then they're going to threaten a flank on you. And that's always going to happen. Every fight. But Rogue don't flank. I don't know why. Malrang here could have such a good flank angle. If he had W up, what he would do is he could just go over to here, pink this bush or have it swept and sit here right now. And Odo can be the one staring at them. And then the ideal scenario for a team fight for him is that he could just W over this wall, and as Odo's channeling his ult, he could flash E knock up, and that's their engage, because they have really good engage. But as much as they see the Wukong, they will always be able to disengage with Draven E, with Yankos Pillar. They can always disengage. Now watch this fight. I'm just gonna play it and not say a word. Alright, what's wrong with that fight? There's a couple things already. Odo Amne is channeling his Ornald because he feels rushed. He says, this dragon's on 3k, they're TPing in, we have to go now. If Malrang was in a better position, like here, where he could W over, then this would have so much more threat, this Ornald. Now imagine the Wukong is in stealth, and he's about to flash ER here or something. This is threat. Then an Ornald can follow up on something, and they can triple knock up, get their flashes, force them out, turn on Yankos. There's things to do in the fight. If your Ornn is just ulting because he needs to, because they're going to finish, G2 will just split up and just sit like this. Because they see Wukong, they've seen Braum, they've seen Azir, they've seen Zeri. Everyone's accounted for. There's no threat of flanks whatsoever. G2 don't feel pressured into anything. They can just stand here, wait, and then once their engaged tools are down, they just engage on them. And now you've got a situation where your Zeri Braum's being engaged on, your Azir is trying to kite, and your Wukong can't even ult their backline. He has to ult to run away, so G2 can run forwards. And I think Rogue need to work on the way they approach fights if they want to continue down this Wukong train, if they want to play things like Rakan on Trimby. If Larson wants to play things like Lissandra, LeBlanc, Sylas, Ari, champs that can go around the sides, this is really important. The next thing I want to look at is the way Rogue plays their lanes in mid to late game. And a lot of the time, this is actually the strength of Asian teams. Odo Amne was talking a little bit about it on Euphoria, about how teams play on 2 lanes to deny the way you're playing on 3. Now, it sounds complicated, but I'll try to explain. And I'll try to explain it visually. What it means to play on 2 or 3 lanes is quite simple, actually. let's say you're in a state like right now with Rogue. You're playing 1-3-1. Now 1-3-1's great because you can try to contest the push in all 3 lanes, right? Odo Amle's bot, he can start to contest caps. You have 3-man mid and you have comp top. Ideal, right? Wrong. Now, what G2 are doing is they're playing on 2 lanes. Caps is pushing bot, Jankos is hovering, Broken Blade's abandoned top and he's running mid. They're playing on 2 lanes and they're playing on 2 lanes hard. Now that means that 1, they could have really good engage, 2, they can siege quickly, and 3, they can rotate up and down these lanes faster. Now, what Rogue would ideally want to do here is push in mid-wave and go top, and then they can be the ones playing on 2 lanes, but they can't. Why? Because Broken Blade's running mid. Now, they don't know that yet, but they'll find out on this mid-wave that's coming out of base that they will not be able to play on 2 lanes. They can only play on 1, and that's top lane, despite having their resources split across three lanes. Now, what ends up happening is Larssen gets caught. Caps gets bot tier 1. Rogue's ideal play here is to get top tier 1. Lulu hovers to make sure he can do it. Aatrox, if he stays, he gets dove. Happy days, right? Larssen can TP up, worst case. You know, they need to force this top tier 1 because they're trading from behind right now. And yes, they're behind in gold, but the ideal situation for them now is to just trade tier 1 for tier 1. But what ends up happening is Larssen gets caught. Now, of course, it sucks that he gets caught, but he gets caught recalling on a pink and G2 get the kill. The problem that Rogue have is because they're playing on 3 lanes, and G2 is pressuring mid and bot so hard, the Zeri has no job, the Lulu's trying to cover a dive that doesn't exist, and Malrang's also hovering to do so, and now Larsen's dead. So you've spread your resources so thin that when they overcommit on 1 or 2 lanes, you cannot respond. Even if Larssen doesn't get caught here, they could herald mid. Jarvan could even... Let's just imagine Larsen's alive. He's in base. They push the wave in. He wants the TP back. TP's on this tower. Already Jarvan's here to threaten a dive. Azir's here to threaten a dive. Zeri's nowhere to respond. Lulu's nowhere to respond. And G2 know that because they have to take this top tier 1. Otherwise, they're screwed. So the way they play on 2 lanes is weak. And the way they play on 3 lanes spread too thinly means you can overforce on those 2 lanes and get early game advantages. Now, the pick was just the cherry on top. I think G2 would have been able to pull off bot tier 2 and mid tier 1 regardless. The pick got them this mid tier 2. The reason that they got them this mid tier 2 is because comp doesn't base. Comp could just take this tower and base now and let the wave bounce and try to run to save this tier 2 because they have no herald. But he has to overcommit. He has to push out the wave. And he knows the play is already doomed because Larsen's dead, right? So there's a world where I think Rogue could have defended this tier 2 if Larsen was alive. Nevertheless, this is the power of playing on 2 lanes. The Herald is also helping out because they got them an extra tier 2 because they already just got bot tier 1. But you can overforce so hard on 2 lanes. Now, this can backfire if you don't play it properly. But in most cases, you should have the threat to make it happen. The ideal setup here for Rogue, actually, would have been... If you want to play on 3 lanes, and you have to play on 3 lanes, is that comp should not be top. It should be Larsen who's top, and comp should be mid. 2 reasons. 1, comp is a lot more mobile than Larsen, and he can actually survive plays a lot easier, and he's just come out of base, right? He just came out of base to top. And 2, Larsen has TP, right? So their AD carry is split pushing top to try and get this top tier 1. And he can never really rejoin his team on mid, even if they spread too thinly. This is a band-aid, this TP. If they spread too thin top and they need to TP mid, sure, it sucks, but at least you don't lose too many towers, right? But Rogue fucked up here a bit on 3 lanes, and they could not really defend the play. Larsen getting picked always hurts, but I think it's a bit of a weird one, because Larsen doesn't really want to be on a side lane, but it's better for him to be on a side lane because he has TP, because they're playing on 2 lanes, and their bot lane can be the ones collapsing top rather than Larsen being the one collapsing top. I know it's awkward, but I think that's just a better setup. And when we'll see this again, where they play poorly on 2 lanes, on 3 lanes, is here. Now, what's G2 doing? They're going to push out top with Azir, and they're going to run mid, and they're going to own this side of the map. Bot lane is 1v1. But what Caps does, smartly, is he just TP's bot. Now, he knows that Rogue have no pressure. They have no mid push, they have no top push, and G2, granted, I think there's a small excuse to be made here that they're just really far ahead, but they can actually afford to make plays, which Rogue want to do. Ideally, what Larsen wants to do here is push out top, base, run bot, and ult down here and kill this guy, and then TP to Nash with Odo if they force it. But it's G2 the ones doing it against them with Azir, right? They just put a ward behind Odo in case he wants to contest bot wave. Rogue think they have 1 lane to play on where they can push out bot and Odo can get it. The Cap just TP's behind him. Now, this actually blew the game up a lot, because despite this not looking like a lot, it means they can just push in so many waves. Odo's dead, bots get pushed in, they can collapse towards mid. Rogue has like a Hail Mary engage where they're saying, oh, both their solo lanes are bot, maybe we can force mid. They're forced into a mistake. Broken Blade TPs, runs in, Caps runs in, they get 2 kills, they get Snash. Boom. Game's over. So I feel like Rogue is very bad at their mid to late game on lane assignments and their way they're playing through lanes. The next thing we're going to look at is the way they approach their draft in the G2 game. Because the way they swapped it up in the 3rd game made sense to me a little bit, but they were over tunnel visioning a lot on Jarvan, you know. Their read on the meta was weird. You look at their Mad Lion series, right? As an example. Malrang Jarvan, win. Malrang Jarvan, win. Rogue loss, no Jarvan. Rogue loss, Jarvan. Rogue win, Jarvan. They played 4 games of Jarvan in that series. Then they come into the G2 series. They play the first game out with a Trundle ban against Jankos. He plays Jarvan. I don't think Jarvan was even a big deal in that game. We just saw it. He was like 0-1-0. Malrang was a little bit ahead after they scuffed the top dive. The Jarvan wasn't a huge problem, but Larsen's playing in a mobile champ. So maybe that's why they thought, if we're going to play Lulu and Talia, we need to ban Jarvan. So now they're forced into this severe rotation Azir first pick with Jarvan ban for the next 2 games, which just feels like it just feels unnecessary. It feels kind of like a wasted ban. Why don't they prioritize Jarvan more? You know, pick blue side, ban away Trundle, first pick Jarvan. Because it feels like they're juggling jungle picks so much. You go to their first game, they ban Trundle, they first rotate Sejuani. Great. You go to their second game, they ban Sejuani, and then they drop jungle to a Xin Zhao. And then you go to their third game, and they ban Sejuani and Jarvan, like they did last game, and then they go to a Wukong. And Jankos picks Trundle into Ornn. So some of these drafts just feel like they're trying to put their hand in every teapot, you know? It doesn't really make sense what they're doing for jungle, at least. So I'm a bit concerned about what their approach is going to be in draft when it comes to jungle picks. The next thing I want to mention, now it's very hard to visually represent, but if you cast your mind back and you've been watching the playoffs, G2 and Mad Lions and Fnatic are 3 teams that will late invade you. They will level 1 invade you, they will split the map, they'll pick Kalista, they'll do whatever the fucking bot lane champs they're playing. Even if they're not super oppressive, they will try to screw you over level 1. You think back to the Misfit series, G2 did it. The Mad series, they did it against Rogue. But late invades are really powerful because it really gets in the enemy's head. You know, you're like, shit, they could level 1 invade. Do we ward early? That means they lose ward lanes for wards. Wards for tracking jungle later on. So Rogue really need to start shaping up their level 1s a bit and trying to find these late invades, or actually doing something proactive level 1 with their wards to stop these late invades. Alright, now we're done with weaknesses that I think I feel like are the weaknesses for Rogue. Let's go to questions. Stylistic approaches. Now, a couple questions I will have. Number 1, Rogue's going up against Fnatic. What's Wunder's most comfortable champ and weak, quote-unquote, side top laner that can actually carry games? Gwen. And he's actually had pretty good performances on them. He's been playing quite a lot in playoffs. Renekton, Gwen are his like go-to carries. The question is, do you leave open Gwen? And if you do you have an answer to Gwen if you're red side? If he blinds Gwen, does auto pick Jax? Does auto pick Fiora? Does auto pick champs that can contest the Gwen? Because in my mind, the answer is no. So I would be worried about Gwen on 4-5 if I was Rogue and I was red side. The next question I have for Rogue is, do you want to play Senna lanes? You just played against G2, they smashed you with Senna Seraphine. You want to play Senna Seraphine yourself? How early was it into the split that they were playing Senna Seraphine? It was week 2. Rogue, 2 games of Senna. Senna Seraphine, Soraka Senna. Do you guys want to play Senna? I feel like if I'm Rogue, it's a no-brainer. If I'm scrimming next week and I'm up against Fnatic, who is a team that will play through bot, Senna Seraphine seems like a no-brainer to me on a 2-3 on blue side, or even on a 1 for Senna first rotation on red side, and then pick AD or support on 3. Because I feel like both of these teams have a very similar style. Odo, Wunder to me seem like very similar players in that they'll play Renekton as a carry, maybe Kennen/Gwen as well. Razork and Malrang, full early game players, always just focusing on current meta, Trundle, Poppy, all that good stuff. Mid lane is where I think the only real difference is, because I think Humanoid, and the reason Humanoid's not dying a lot this playoffs, think back to the regular season as to why they were struggling, was because now he's playing a lot more mobile champs. Barring the Victor, Ahri, LeBlanc, Sylas are the champs that he's leaning towards, it feels a lot harder to actually punish him, and he's actually turned his brain on a little bit more about where jungle is, and maybe his comms have gotten better to track jungle, to actually not fall prey to ganks, right? That's the overlap that he has with Larsen. You know, they play Victor, Sylas, Ahri, basically. Other than that, there's no LeBlanc here. Even when I say Sylas, Larsen's Sylas has been a bit underwhelming. So, and Azir is also their go-to, right? So mid lane pool is slightly contested, small differences. But when it comes to bot lane, they're basically the exact same comp and upset. Not in terms of strength of player, but in terms of champ pool. Kalista, Draven, Sivir, Zeri, you'll see that. It's just upset doesn't really play that much Senna. He hasn't played any Senna lanes with Hilly. They're just maining Lucian, Nami, and Twitch Yumi if they get it. So bot lane is where I also wonder what the dynamic will be, because The approach Rogue can go for is I will pick Seraphine Senna in game 1 against your Draven Kalista first rotation or Lucian Nami first rotation. And we'll see how it goes. If they win, then it has to be banned. And then they might give them Lucian Nami again and play Caitlyn Lux into it like they did against Mad Lions and win. So I feel like Rogue have a slight advantage in bot champ pool, depending on what they give over, right? If they give over Draven, then they need to play Kalista or something that can match it. If they give over Kalista, then God knows what you're going to play. The last question I have for Rogue, and the last question I'll be asking myself is, do we ban Yuumi? Now, Rogue have been banning Yuumi a lot, and Hilly has played one Yuumi game. Is it worth to give them Yuumi once to test it out? Because if you just think about how Fnatic plays the game right now. They play heavy through bot, right? They play mid to bot, jungle to bot, force dives, force them to back off, try to force any lead in bot possible. Yes, he might go towards top every now and then, Razork, when it comes to Herald or if Wunder has a good wave, but it's always going to be about bot. Do you really mind giving them over Twitch Yuumi? I mean, what was the biggest strength they had in that game? Well, first of all, Exile was ahead when they were playing the Nocturne Cannon comp. Second of all, Upset was cheesing level 1, which I think they can track really easily. And third of all, do they have anything else they can play with Sivir Yuumi? With Yuumi, sorry, Sivir, maybe other than the Twitch? Do you just pick Jarvan into it anyway and give them Yuumi? Are they going to play Ezreal Yuumi? Is that something you're really scared of against Fnatic? So I would be asking myself, if I'm Rogue right now in the discussion, do we ban Yuumi for game 1? Do we just leave it open and see if we can get it? But if you see in Eastern regions especially, Yuumi is actually really broken with 2 champions that aren't bot laners. Wukong and Aatrox are the 2 champs which Yuumi successfully plays really well with in LPL and LCK drafts. So what are my draft expectations for this series? Well, I think it can go a lot of different ways. I'll start off with a few examples. I think Rogue can approach this in 2 ways, like I said before. One is they can try to force a Kalista first pick. Now, does Fnatic want to give that to them? I'm not sure, but I feel like there's a few bans that might be locked for Fnatic depending on what's banned. For example, on the second one, I feel like if Rogue banned Trundle on blue side against Razork, which I think is actually a pretty good ban, then I think they're forced into a Poppy ban, and then you have a really good Jarvan first pick. And if they early rotate something like Lucian Nami, then Senna Seraphine might be their answer to it in terms of the defensive way to play the game. But there's a couple wildcard champs in here, right? I think Azir, Ahri, Sylas are the 3 wildcard champs I think of when it comes to this series. And I think Sylas ban on blue side is also not bad for Rogue, right? They're gonna have to do a lot of scenarios here. The way draft meetings go is you sit there for about 3 or 4 hours with your team going through every scenario on blue side, on red side, on blue side, on red side. So I'm not gonna do that. I don't really have the time. So what I'll do is I'll go through some of the first pick scenarios that could work really well for Rogue and the approaches that they can take. I think a Jarvan first pick could be great if Senna Seraphine's open and you leave them to let them have Lucian Nami. And Jarvan will be really good against Nami here because you're playing Senna Seraphine with it. So that could be the way to shut down their bot lane because you have a more early game jungle and Poppy Trundle's down. That forces Razork onto things like Wukong, which I'm not sure if you'll be happy playing. The next approach you have is dropping Sejuani Prio. Now, I think Sejuani Prio could be pretty high in this series if Trundle, Poppy are banned early on. But there's definitely a mistake that Fnatic could make is if they give over first pick Kalista and they try to play something like Sivir into it and Jarvan Trundle are up. I think that Rogue are pretty happy finding jungle on 3 here and they can take their preference of mid. I think they can drop support if they have a Kalista lane because they can play Leona, Nautilus, Alistar, whatever the fuck they want into Sivir. Renata could be another good one if they want to pick it here. But that's their way of playing through bot, for bot to deny Fnatic. And this is their way of playing a good 3v3 jungle support AD to get mid push in the mid to late game and also have really good scaling. For mid pool, I think when it comes to 4-5 and comfort, Azir will be super contested by both these mids. Ahri will be super contested by both these mids, Sylas as well. I think Talia could be a good ban by Fnatic to deny Larsen any kind of mid push early and roam potential. And LeBlanc could be a good ban for Rogue if they struggle in game 1 against it, if Humanoid plays it in the early rotation, because it's a no-brainer if they try to play a Jarvan trap. That's what I would be scared of in this trap, for example, if they pick LeBlanc on 3. This is already becoming a bit sketchy because now you have to ban things like Gwen. And if they ban away things like Sandra Azir, then it feels a bit hard to pick mid here on 4-5 for Rogue because you might lack damage. You know, if you're playing Ahri, Senna, Seraphine, you need some kind of carry top there, like an Aatrox or something that will do well. Because Senna Seraphine needs a carry top, I feel like. If you play Ornn, Senna, Seraphine, it's a lot of magic damage. On top of the fact that you'll probably have a mage mid like Azir and then a Jarvan jungle for engage and follow up, you might lack damage. So you need to make sure that they have a really good carry top blind if they're going to pull this off. Or they have some kind of AD mid like a Yone or something that would work in tandem with it. So that was the Rogue rundown. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's my first time doing something like this, going through their weaknesses, places that I would target, their stylistic approach. These are all discussions that that Fnatic will be having about Rogue, and we'll see what their game looks like. If you want my prediction, I think that this will be a Fnatic win. I remember I came to the studio last weekend, and I looked at Vedi and I said, yeah, G2's going to 3-0 Rogue on the spot. And Vedi was like, no, there's no way. And I was like, yep, they're going to 3-0 them. And then they did. And then in stream, I remember I predicted Fnatic to win over Mad. So my predictions are good so far. I might have jinxed it, but I feel like Fnatic are going to win this game. Yes, Rogue have more flexibility in the way that they draft, and I think Rogue's win condition is taking Razorg off of Trundle Poppy and taking their bot lane off of something Comfort or having something to match in it. You know, I can see game 1, Senna Seraph into Lucian, win, Caitlyn Lux into Lucian, win, now Fnatic throw everything out of the fucking window and they have no clue what they're doing. And Yuumi is also another wild card factor in these drafts, but I think Fnatic will pull through. But if Rogue do check both of those boxes or either one of them, Fnatic will definitely struggle in this series. I think it'll be a very close series because I think both teams have the exact same playstyle, but I predict Fnatic to win 3-2. There'll be a video on Fnatic tomorrow, so if you enjoyed this, I'll be doing a similar one for Fnatic.